handle the truth.
And welcome, folks. Welcome to Truth versus News here on August the 17th, Monday. The Democratic Convention starts today. I'm Donald Glenn here in Tahiti, and I guess I got to get back to business and work and do what I can do here on all the things that I'd like to start off. We have a special guest today, Mr. David Kenney, a great attorney out of California, and so he and Scott, the best minds in the world, are here, and we're going to go in with what I'd like to start off with, but I have to start off with, is that America is ruled by lies and truth is completely absent, and the American population tolerates it. Rule by lies is now the American way, and when truth is politicized, all is lost. Hopefully that is wrong, but that's the basis of our show, Truth versus News Incorporated. And Jim, I think we got a lot of talking about, especially one video that is pretty profound here. So,
now, fascinating development Friday. Millie Weaver, who's an independent journalist formerly associated with InfoWars, was arrested the very day that her documentary Shadowgate was to be released. She had established with others that if something were to happen, it should go forward. Pete Santilli distinguished himself. I've had my differences with Pete, but in this instance, he was just masterful. He had an extended conversation with the two primary sources for Millie's documentary. Here's writing about it. Last week, I was excited when I saw Millie's tweet with a trailer of her new documentary to be released. Yesterday morning, I was instead appalled to see she posted herself getting arrested without a warrant in front of her son on a grand jury indictment for burglary. In the hours that have lapsed, I've gleaned her husband, Gavin Wentz, who, by the way, appears to be some kind of video genius and had to do with the production of the documentary, was also arrested. They're currently in the custody of the Portage County Sheriff's Office in Ohio. Here's an image of Millie. Skipper Chorus contacted the Portage County Sheriff's Office confirming that she had been served a secret indictment. Very odd. The charges include tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, and domestic violence. The burglary has been altered to robbery. It appears to be based on an altercation with her mother, a family argument where her mother was recording the argument and Millie took it. Her mother asked the charges be dropped, but they've used it, it appears to me, as a pretext. By early afternoon, one of the two whistleblowers, Tori, posted Weaver's blockbuster film. As I watched, it was all I could do to avoid having my brain splatter all over the wall, meaning it's mind-boggling.
Absolutely.
Shadowgate features two whistleblowers, Tori and Patrick Berge, who describe a network of government contractors in the intel community with access to the NSA's surveillance, all of it, and AI programs, who exploit the information with blackmail to control politicians and other elites. The globalist traders are the primary administrators of the fourth generation warfare being waged against the American people. The film details interactive internet activities and the military psychological warfare weapon ShadowNet, which is used to control the public narrative through fake news, to fix elections, to organize the BLM riots, among other things, by sending information to parties who've been, in many cases, provided with cell phones that they know is going to affect them to behave in certain ways. Berge explains how ShadowNet was built by the military with U.S. tax dollars, how General James Jones, Obama's national security advisor, took the intellectual property and privatized it for personal gain. Berge said ShadowNet was used heavily in the Ukraine color revolution by Paul Manafort, that an entire cottage industry has sprung up with multiple companies using the software. This appears to correspond with a piece I just published on my blog by Whitney Webb. Meet the Israeli intelligence link firm using AI to profile Americans and guide U.S. lockdown policy. Meanwhile, the Jewish Voice published this. Watch the banned documentary exposing deep state from arrested journalist Millie Weaver. For the first 30 hours before YouTube began to ban all copies, over 700,000 views had watched. It's extremely questionable why it would be banned. There's no hate speech, no misleading medical information, no violence, just people who claim various things about data collection and what's going on behind the scene, the real secret shadow government. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, I'll be delicate and subtle and indirect in my comments about Shadowgate because it delves into a world where I was part of it in 2007 and 8 and 9 and 10 and before that. But everything that she reported and what Burgee said, of course, is right on. And the artificial intelligence and psychological operations and the formulaic approach to generating information operations with computer systems, that certainly sounds very reasonable to me, but I can neither confirm nor deny certain things. I had a clearance, so I've got to always be very delicate. And I think this arrest of Millie Weaver is precisely for that. She was directly over the target. And, these two people, I haven't, well, I won't say I haven't met them, but I haven't been able to really piece a lot of the stuff, and I won't, because this is so explosive, Jim. It's very, very telling for the president to use this, because what she's exposed are people are the inside, people that were contracted by Special Operations Command in Tampa, Florida, at MacDill Air Force Base to engage in these information operations as described by Burgee on this Shadowgate film, which I can certainly, again, say is very reasonable. And it seems very, very likely that exactly what he was saying was exactly what was happening and more. And of course, the transmutation of this into the private sector is another trail of bloody fingerprints that needs to be followed, because they do this. They take the technology, they invent it, they get vast amount of government contract monies. Booz Allen Hamilton, SAIC, they're all based out in McLean, Virginia, in a little village. They're all like a stone's throw from each other with massive compounds. And this is exactly what they do. This is exactly what these people did. And it's going to be an interesting tell. This whole ludicrous thing about charging her with a crime relating to her mother and a cell phone, that seems extremely, out of order for law. That would seem to be something that is handled without a grand jury. This is something that's a domestic issue. But for them to come down upon her and her videotape it, as I said before, it's either fake and used to inflate numbers and clicks, or it's real. And if it's real, I think it's something that should be fully explored by Trump and people inside. But I'll let David Kenney kind of talk about more of the legal issues.
Scott, 2 points. They reportedly had the indictment for 4 months. So obviously they were waiting for this occasion to try to suppress her release of the video, but she'd already anticipated and worked around it. And in addition, notice how they highlighted the nullification of the Smith-Munt Act of 1948, which you and I have addressed. I thought this was almost a surgical dissection of the big picture. I was very impressed with the quality, and I'm given to understand her husband had a great deal to do with this. David, your thoughts?
My first view is that this is absolutely consistent with Robert Pastor and General David Petraeus working with the Obama administration and trying to put together the North American Union to disappear the border between the United States and Mexico, and to start eliminating the border in Canada. What's interesting to me is she fingers and points in Shadowgate to Jones, who's the head of the Institute oh, I can't think of the name of it right now.
Yeah,
The,
they're talking about 4 or 5 different, groups there. But go ahead, David.
yeah, but Jones is the head of the. It'll come to me. But this institute has fundamentally charted the liberal left agenda for evaporating and imposing governance throughout Mexico and throughout the United States, and to build corresponding regulations across all aspects of business. So when this was initially introduced, and I was following everything she said, I believed virtually everything that was put in the video. There's not a thing I disbelieved.
Right.
Based on my knowledge of the history of transactions, the parties involved, the timing of everything, it's clear to me that the Obama administration was deeply involved. Biden was deeply involved. Yep. And he was doing, during the same period of time, negotiating with the Chinese and negotiating with the Mexicans, with the Mexican government. When I say negotiating with the Chinese, I mean negotiating with the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah. And he was involved in high-level economic dialogue with Mexico. So this switching and this movement into the institutes themselves, I think, shows where the brain trust is. The brain trust is in the Brookings Institute. Okay, so the Brookings Institute, all of this is going to, I guarantee you, you watch, here's the prediction. All of this is going to track back to the Brookings Institute, and it's all dealing with globalization, including Mexico and China. And that's what's going to be revealed if President Trump and his prosecutors continue down their pathway. They're on the right path. Whether or not they've broken through the collateral noise and hit into the main issues, that's another question. But they're going to get there because all this evidence is going to lead to Jones, Petraeus, Robert Pastor, and the North American Union.
Yeah, and Michael Hayden and John Brennan and,
right.
McChrystal, and the manipulation of information so they can actually induce individuals to perform the actions they want them to induce. It was talking about Obama giving these inexpensive cell phones en masse to poor people so they could feed them information that would lead them to act in the ways they want them to act. I'll tell you, David, a friend of mine has been speaking to me for years about the role of mind control. I'd never seen how it could be implemented until now. Right. And I agree with you 100%. I didn't see anything there that Millie presented that didn't seem to me to be spot on. I'm just so impressed. Scott.
Let me read a couple things from Jones's bio. One of the key things is Jones is an investor in the company Dynology, operated by his son, Jim Jones.
Right.
During the 2008 presidential election, it operated in email communications for the McCain campaign. Jones is also on the board of General Dynamics, Chevron Corporation, Center for Strategic International Studies, the Atlantic Council of the United States.
Very big, Atlantic Council, yes.
Project on National Security Reform, Boeing. The guy is up to his gills in all of these military-industrial complex operations. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice asked Jones twice to be Secretary of State. He's a deep stater. He's a deep state guy, General Jones. There's a lot of other stuff that you can say about him. But this revelation by Millie Weaver and Dynology, I've downloaded the video before it could be removed from YouTube. So we will continue to explore and dissect it and get it out. Jim?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I had a show last night about it. Yeah. I think I have an image here related to there too. Actually, right there, Shadowgate, the real shadow government with Danny Saris last night. And it included the video. And I gotta say, Scott, I'm just fascinated by how they showed, by virtue of profiling every individual, they can send them the information that'll trigger their behavior one way or another, so they can organize riots, they can affect voting, they can pre-select a jury pool. They were saying, explaining to Roger Stone that the pool from which his jurors was picked had already been pre-selected, so they were all going to vote guilty. And I've even speculated in my case, they did the same with my jury pool. It was stunning how they seem monotonously unified. It was like you brought in a dozen robots, you know? I mean, it's just fascinating. But I'm telling you, I never, Scott, I never before had really understood how they could bring about this implementation of mind control, but now I see it clearly. David, your further thought.
Well, I really enjoyed the mind control aspects because it reminded me of the nature and extent to which we've seen the paradigm in education take place. We've gone from what we grew up with, which is, you know, using books and going to libraries, and, you know, to write something, we'd have 12 books laid out on a big library table and we'd be writing it. Now everything is cut and paste and collect and steal and republish it as your own.
Deal.
You know, it's you know, we have, as and I've learned the difference. As a lawyer, you have to do this work. Okay, I mean, it's mandatory. Exhibit, date, description. I was taught by Jack Quinn, everything, exhibit, date, description. And now with this paradigm shifting to computers and online learning and taking people and children and having them learn at home, and then you have this programmatic shift, and you have the introduction of the LGBTQ agenda, so on and so forth. Yeah. It's really the Democratic Party. You know, they've won one state, absolutely. And you think I'm going to say California? No, they've run the state of obliquity. They have so departed from moral values and from reasoning. It's just shocking. There's no real wisdom that's being advocated. There's no moral basis being advocated. It's just this relative chaos tasked in certain directions, whether it's by BLM or by Antifa or by whomever. So these patterns you see, and, you know, listen, these guys are military generals that are doing this. Yeah. You know, people are not being wasted in the process. You're seeing some lives being bumped up and shattered, but people are not getting killed in mass numbers at this point in time. But, you know, don't put it past these SOBs to amplify, to combat.
Yeah,
I think it's imminent.
Yeah. Scott, your further thoughts.
Well, I'll just, again, I have to be very delicate.
Yes.
You can tiptoe.
But I can just say that Millie Weaver seemed to be suggesting that all of this computer psychological operation material, programs, contractors that were pitching it and selling it to the military as a replacement for the PSYOP officers that were doing it. She seemed to suggest this was happening in Washington, D.C. in 2008 and 2009. And I think she's exactly right about that, is my best guess. I'll end it there, Jim.
Right. Your best guesses are pretty good in this area, Scott. Oh, yeah. We have come to appreciate the value of your guesses. Meanwhile, New York Post columnist Kamala Harris is a political chameleon with the eye on Biden's job. It's just a ploy to get them to win the election. They know a new brand of socialist progressive Democrat is unpalatable, so they're presenting her as a moderate when she's actually anything but. She's the most progressive senator, even more so than Bernie Sanders. She's for four-term abortion, criminalizing climate skeptics or deniers. She's criminalizing gun manufacturers. She's giving illegal immigrants free health care. There's not an issue you can think about she hasn't taken the most extreme progressive position. I think most voters realize Joe Biden's not all there. And then Kamala Harris will most likely become president before the end of her first term. Asked if there's a distinction between Harris and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for example, or a Warren, Devine called Harris a chameleon. AOC and Warren, whatever else you say about them, they are genuine, they are authentically liberal. I think with Kamala, she'll be whatever she needs to be at the time, and she's incredibly ambitious. If I'm allowed to use that word, his eye is on the prize, which is Joe Biden's job. Meanwhile, the pick confirms Biden's campaign is about one thing: hating Donald Trump. Kamala Harris is an unbridled opportunist, someone who will say and do anything to get ahead. She ran for Attorney General of California as a law and order Democrat. In office, she happily jailed nonviolent drug offenders, oversaw the disproportionate incarceration of African Americans, of whom she is not one, cheerled for a truancy bill that could jail single mothers, and hid evidence of a man wrongly convicted for murder. She offered a full-throated endorsement of the Green New Deal, supported absolute open borders, abortion on demand, advocates doing away with private health care insurance with her Medicare for All scam. Meanwhile, the Democrats are already signaling a post-election surrender on health care. On the eve of the Democratic National Convention, believe it or not, it begins today. There's been virtually no publicity about it. I think they're maybe hoping people won't even tune in. The healthcare industry is launching a new ad campaign, pressing Democrats to back off the party's compromised healthcare promises. A substantial public option, which the polls show is wildly popular, was a centerpiece of recent negotiations between supporters of Biden and of progressive Senator Bernie, who'd been pushing for a more expansive Medicare for All program. A draft of the party platform approved by DNC members included a pledge to pass a public option or government-run health insurance plan that would compete. Within 24 hours of the launch of the new ads, however, anonymous sources were telling the Hill that Democrats won't bother with a public action fight next year if Biden's actually elected.
Yeah,
Scott, your
real
thoughts?
quickly, I want to just insert that Miss Harris's first name is really chameleon.
I've
Well,
heard other variations that are more entertaining, but also more obscene. So,
well, first
Scott,
of all,
your thoughts?
I think it's very lucky that we had Kamala Harris appointed, because if Tulsi Gabbard, for example, had been appointed, I think it could have been a little bit difficult for Trump to win. Tulsi Gabbard, the Army Major Lieutenant Colonel in Hawaii, the moderate, the very mellow, conservative parents, Hawaiian gal, very attractive, very charismatic. Had she been put in as vice president, there is a possibility that she could have unseated Donald Trump. I say that, we've talked about this before. She is the ideal person to have attracted people out of certain Republican camps and would have really given a moderate voice to the Democrat Party. However, God has blessed America by giving them this insane, racist, bigot, violent liar who represents nothing but reparations and vengeance and bitterness. She is a Frankenstein, a morph of both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. She doesn't know who she is or what she is, but we have seen her track record. She's voted, she's refused to defend Proposition 8 in California, which was marriages between a man and a woman, period. And she refused to defend that law. It was law, and it was cast down, from the judges because of it. She's also engaged in so many different acts of, I think, just despicable, unconstitutional ignorance and failure. She slept her way through her jobs, being the girlfriend adulteress of Willie Brown and moving up in all these capacities. So I don't think there's any chance for the Democrats to win this, because all they represent is not only hating Donald Trump, but madness, chaos, revenge, burning buildings, police being defunded and attacked, and old ladies being pushed over in their walkers by black thugs. All of this madness and rage of Black Lives Matter and all that, the general public and the 72% of America, which is white, and the Asians, the Vietnamese, the Hindus, the real Hindu, the real Sikhs, the real conservative, traditional family value people, they are against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris because they represent the opposite of their views. And I think the more and more people get to know them, the less and less attractive they are. But I will again say this: I'll put my money down on that black number that Joe Biden is not going to be. And it seems like Jeanine Pirro is listening to us. I don't think Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. I think they're going to assassinate him and replace him with someone else, possibly Gavin Newsom, because it's the only way that they can generate sufficient guilt and trauma that they would try and weaponize into communication, psychological operations to, don't vote for Trump out of respect for the dead Biden. That's what my feeling is that they're going to do, because calculation-wise, it is the only way that they can get the numbers and get over that wall. But maybe I'm wrong.
Given his declaration to a black woman, Cynthia McKinney would have been sensational. Yeah. I think Cynthia would have even polled better than Tulsi, though you and I are both very much in her support. David, your thoughts?
Well, I tried a case in LA Superior Court against the Attorney General, against Kamala Harris, not her personally, because she didn't show up to court. She sent one of her deputy attorney generals. And the case was about the prosecution of my client, who was completely innocent. It was a political prosecution. And the information that was turned over to the Attorney General's office, none of it was checked. None of it was verified. They just took it plain and simple as if all the facts were true. And they tried to remove my client from office by virtue of a quo warranto proceeding. These proceedings are really complicated. We went in front of a judge, by the way, a wonderful judge by the name of Judge Michael Johnson, a sterling judge on the bench of LA Superior Court. And he went over this case with a fine-tooth comb, as I did to prepare for it. He decided in our favor. And what it showed me about Attorney General Harris was that she wasn't familiar with the cases, didn't review any of the background materials, went ahead and launched it to ruin the life of my client, and continued to prosecute it when I sent letters to her staff members saying, why are you guys doing this? This is a malicious prosecution.
Yep.
So it doesn't surprise me that, that she's grasping for this position of being vice president. And I agree with Mr. Bennett. I think he's quite right that Joe Biden has virtually I believe he's got no intention of running for president. He seems to me to be scared to death of appearing in public. He just doesn't want to be out there on the forefront. I mean, I remember candidates like Richard Nixon, JFK when I was a kid. They were both out, pounding the cities all around America trying to get elected. They're out there trying to develop this thing. But since the 60s, television has played this overwhelming role in the election of presidential candidates. We've studied that all in political science. And now it's gotten to the point where it's simply a matter of TV. Now, I think this convention's going to fail miserably for the Democrats, and I look forward to it. I don't look forward to people that support abortion, especially abortion on demand, or late-term abortion. That's offensive to me. I don't appreciate people who want to demolish the border of the United States of America. We've spent 250 odd years building up this country, okay? And we're going to continue to do so. I believe, like Trump said in South Dakota, he used the term manifest destiny in his adventure into space with the new Space Force. That was moving to me. I had goosebumps. I mean, I was overwhelmed. Everybody knows what manifest destiny is. Now, did we treat the Indians gracefully when we got to America? No.
Oh.
And it's something we have to reconcile with, okay? I believe that's an obligation of the American people to treat and to work with the tribal Indians and to repair the breach between the tribes and the American people. That's something that America has to do. But the fact, he's not talking about white America. He's not talking about Latino America. He's not talking about Black America. He's not talking about Indian America. He's talking about America for everyone when he says it's the manifest destiny. And that's the manifest destiny of our future. It's no longer here on the earth. It's headed into the stars, brothers, okay? We're headed to the moon. We're headed to Mars. You know, we've got to take care of our planet. We've got to, and at the same time, we've got to get off it. All right. So, you know, I think this is stunning. I don't think Kamala Harris is a viable candidate. She's got 2 years in the Senate, maybe. You know, she's just being separated from her wet nurse. And I heard from a good friend of mine, and I believe this guy is, you know, very much the erudite, told me that her family members were slave owners in Jamaica. I haven't confirmed that, but that's been reported to me. So how does Kamala Harris address those subjects? But to think that a guy who's been convicted of murder and she's holding evidence of his innocence and not doing anything about it, if that's true, if that alone is true, she should be indicted.
Yeah.
It's well documented, David. 100%.
She should be wait.
Yeah.
If it's documented, she should be indicted.
I agree. I agree and make great points. Now, what they're trying to do, of course, is to destroy conventional politics by means of the coronavirus. Here's one illustration. I think this was a colossal blunder. Biden-Harris team urges mask mandate for all Americans. Joe Biden said that if he were elected, he'd require all Americans to wear masks. They claim this is science-based, but it actually contradicts the science. Here's Dr. Joseph Mercola, for example. Should you wear a mask? Not a single randomized controlled trial with verified outcome has been able to detect a statistically significant advantage of wearing a mask. If there were any significant advantage to wearing a mask, it would have been detected in one or another of these trials. No evidence masks are of any utility for preventing infection. Infectious viral diseases spread via very small, fine aerosol particles, and masks that allow you to breathe allow those particles to pass through. Here's another. John Miltimore, Europe's top health officials say masks aren't helpful. In the Netherlands, from a medical point of view, no evidence of a medical effect of wearing face masks. We decided not to use them. The U.S. Attorney General, Surgeon General, face masks in public places are not necessary based on all the current evidence. In Sweden, public health officials, with numbers diminishing very quickly, we see no point in wearing a face mask in Sweden. I wrote here when the local director of public health said there were studies that supported wearing face masks. I wrote her, what studies are you talking about? Even Fauci has said, unless you're sick, no one should wear a mask. And I enumerated these reports. Except for healthcare providers, no one should be wearing a mask. The miserable pseudoscience behind face masks, social distancing, and contact tracing, irreversible brain damage from prolonged face masks, unmasking the truth. Studies show dehumanizing masks weaken you, don't protect you. Dr. Baylock, face masks pose serious risk to the healthy. Then we have studies of surgery, 15 studies showing even in surgery, masks are useless and even spread bacteria and viruses, even in surgery. And it turns out to violate the Occupational Safety Health Administration Act. I mean, this is unbelievable because it deprives your use of oxygen and to the body and brain. So these are not even legal. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, they're causing more harm than any good could ever be forecasted. You're transforming society psychologically into this lemming slave state, and it's becoming a religious cult. It's becoming a religious cult with a virtue signaling, I'm a good automaton, I'm a good Brave New World 1984 worker bee, and anyone who does not have a mask on is immediately pounded upon, attacked, verbally assaulted. We've seen that in senior citizens being yelled at and cursed for not wearing their mask when they protest the Black Lives Matter, Antifa trying to burn down the police station. All of the science, of course, with the doctors appearing before the Supreme Court on the steps, giving their presentation about the realities of COVID-19, the realities of hydroxychloroquine, the absent-mindedness and lack of any scientific integrity behind the mask-wearing phenomenon as being able to stop a virus or sickness. All of this is meant to psychologically traumatize the American people into a submissive behavior and weaponize it against Donald Trump by blaming him for the pain that the Democrats are inflicting upon people. That is the great diabolical irony. The great joke is that a virus did not shut down our schools, nor our businesses, nor our churches. A Democrat governor and Democrat politicians did. Not a virus. Democrat politicians made the conscious choice, the unconstitutional violation of our Constitution, to shut down the schools and businesses and throw people in home confinement, in jail essentially, with an ankle monitor, missing, but that's what it is, and shut down the churches. It was not a virus. It was Democrats who did this. And they did it to inflict pain by pointing a finger at Donald Trump, saying, you have to be shut down for your own good because he hasn't stopped this. He hasn't fixed this. He hasn't waved his magical wand and made this disappear. So you're going to suffer and not go to the beach and not be able to gather and not go to the park and not do anything joyful until you throw him out. And if you don't, it's only going to be miserable. But they've miscalculated, because I think the American people will resort to a violent civil war, a violent shooting war to overthrow. And I mean, I could really see, Jim, Gavin Newsom being going through some tremendous payback by the civilian population.
I could see him being strung up by the neck to a lamppost.
I could just see it, and I don't forecast it, I don't support it, but sociologically and anthropologically and politically, I could see the domestic population getting so enraged by these overreach actions that they take lethal force and execute Gavin Newsom and the mayor of Los Angeles and all of these politicians that have done this, because mass hysteria, when you push a person beyond a certain point, don't be surprised if they react with bloodshed and vengeance. And I think they've miscalculated that. Go ahead.
Do they really think the public's not going to notice that it wasn't the virus and it wasn't the president who locked them down, but it was they themselves? Yeah. David, your thoughts?
Well, I think, I would love to see, I'd love to see an action in federal court that would challenge the governor and would challenge let's just say the state of California, for example, to have a trial. I mean, let's pick a jury, let's have a quick trial, and let's have the jurors decide two issues. One, is there a pandemic? If they decide yes, then two, should we wear masks? Okay. And I believe if you have competent physicians in there testifying, that jury's going to walk out of there. They're going to be 12 reasonable people. I think they're going to embrace the conclusions and the recommendations of our physicians. And it's very clear to me that
Shadowgate, David, showed they can actually
they can
filter the jury pool to get any predetermined conclusion they want. So we're going to have to get honest jurors. It's going to have to be a real random. It's just astounding the extent to which they can manipulate outcomes to fit their own agenda.
No, it's
a further thought, Scott? David,
No, you
excellent.
continue, Anja.
Real
Excellent.
quickly,
Yeah.
this is not a deadly pandemic. It's a pandemic of corruption, really, and it's
Yeah, and even the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons sounds off on face masks. They've done a very thorough study. Most of these are available on my blog at jamesfetzer.org. Regarding the flu they observed on 5 March 2019, masks are not usually recommended in non-healthcare settings. However, this guidance provides other strategies for limiting the spread of influenza. Surgical masks are loose fitting, designed to protect the patient from the doctor. The wearer is not protected from airborne particles. People don't wear masks properly. Most people have the mask under their nose.
Yep.
Designer masks and scarves offer minimal protection. If you're walking alone, no mask. Avoid folks, that's common sense. Children under 2 shouldn't wear masks. Get this. The Wisconsin government department is requiring masks to be worn on Zoom calls. This is so idiotic. I wrote a letter to the editor, which of course they did not publish, confusing computers and human beings. Editor, according to Wisconsin state officials, the idea of employees wearing masks while video conferencing supposedly sets a good example during the pandemic. They even want their employees to wear face masks during Zoom calls, which has to be about as manifest an act of stupidity as any Wisconsin administration has ever displayed. The coronavirus cannot be transmitted via the internet. If the governor and his underlings are this incredibly ignorant, they need to be replaced at the earliest opportunity. They appear to be mixing computer viruses, which can be transmitted via the internet, and human viruses, which cannot, which completely boggles the mind. Even the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, which is the premier scientific medical society in the United States, perhaps even in the world, has come out against face masks. Their research does not support social distancing or lockdowns either. Consider, we know that wearing a mask outside healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. Public health authorities define a significant exposure to COVID-19 as face-to-face contact within 6 feet with a patient with symptomatic COVID-19, meaning already showing symptoms, that is sustained for at least a few minutes, some say more than 10 or even 30. The chance of catching COVID-19 from a passing interaction in a public space is therefore minimal. In many cases, a desire for widespread masking is a reflective reaction to anxiety over the pandemic. Moreover, 15 recent studies of the use of face masks during surgery have demonstrated that they not only do not no good, but actually cause harm to patients. Masks are useless in preventing the spread of disease, and if anything, are unsanitary objects that they themselves spread bacteria and viruses. You might regain patrons if you were to publish more truth and less propaganda about issues affecting the lives of the residents of Wisconsin. Who knows? The governor and staff might actually read letters like this and do a better job of governance for the residents of our state. Meanwhile, here you have a pictorial demonstration of what we're up against, COVID-19, floating through the holes in your mask. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, the scientific medical analysis is very, very telling. It shows you that the impossibility of stopping a virus of that size going through your mask, infecting the body is very apparent. Of course, the other things are the hydroxychloroquine, the general prescriptions for stopping it, are very, very sound. So this is a political weapon, again, to induce fear, trauma, and the media and the Democrats are banking on this to try and push people away from Donald Trump. But I think when Donald Trump starts getting on stage and starts reminding people how dismal and a failure the Democrats have been since January, and that he has really sought to do the best he could with what he had, and really goes on the attack and writes executive orders too that says things like, I would say, an executive order that says, no American citizen shall be forced to wear a mask, period. It is a violation of their constitutional right to life and liberty. no person shall be forced by government to interfere with their body wearing a mask. I think that would win him a vast majority of people, and also say Americans have a right to work and to contract, and the government cannot stop that. So every person who wants to return to work and open their business, an executive order that grants and recognizes that and protects them from the draconian actions against them by Gavin Newsom and others. That's another thing that would win him the majority. Go ahead, Jim.
David, your thoughts?
My thoughts, I'm just shocked that I go out for a walk almost every evening, and once in a while I go out in the mornings. And I went out this past morning, and I saw a mother out with her 3 or 4 kids, all of them wearing masks on their way to the park. And I was going like, my gosh, you've got these 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids wearing masks. They're involved in heavy activity. They're running and playing around. They're breathing their own exhaust. Oh, what are you going to do? Cause these kids to have a pulmonary embolism or something? Right. Starving them from oxygen, increasing CO2 levels. It wouldn't surprise me if they passed out right then and there. And it's a family. They've been living together for the past, since March of 2020, and they're out at a local park and they're all wearing these masks. I go, my gosh, they're going to kill this whole family.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. It's shocking to me. The impact, the effect that it has on young children is an abomination. It's simply an abomination. And to do that to kids, from my perspective, is really offensive, not just to us, but it's offensive to heaven.
Yeah. David, you're 100% correct. It's just stunning. For a political agenda, they're doing permanent damage to the population of the United States. It's so outrageous, and it has no scientific support whatsoever. Truly disgusting, beyond belief. People who are totally unfit to govern the nation. And get this, panic toll. New survey shows greater mental health crisis in U.S. than in other countries. Here's the country-by-country breakdown. Notice how people in the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway exhibit the lowest rates of anxiety. Those are countries that have flatly rejected universal mask wearing and, to varying degrees, other draconian measures. They've avoided the constant symbols reminding the population of fear and panic. On the other hand, the U.S. has the highest level of anxiety. Could it be because politics is more a blood sport in America than any other country? We've had the most incessant onslaught of media propaganda and panic porn. Get this, the lockdown is making young people want to die. The irony of a population of young people being driven to consider ending their lives because they've been asked to hide away from a virus that is unlikely to kill them is almost too much to comprehend. Yet that is apparently part of what the nation must grapple with, even as debate continues to rage over whether children should return to schools. College-aged athletes are told to abandon their dreams, leave the field. One candidate for president suggests a nationwide mask mandate should be in effect for the next 3 months. Stunning. Yeah. From Politico, the toll is falling heaviest on young adults, caregivers, essential workers, and minorities. While 10% of respondents overall reported considering suicide, 25% of those between 18 to 25 reported doing so. Almost 31% of self-reported unpaired caregivers, 22% of essential workers also harbor such thoughts. Hispanic and Black respondents, well above the average. Roughly 30% said they had symptoms of anxiety or depression. 26% trauma, stress-induced. Another 13, they've turned to substance use, including alcohol, prescription or illicit drugs to cope with stress. A report released July 8th by the San Diego-based laboratory Millennium Health, an analysis of 500,000 urine drug tests found an increase in the national use of non-prescribed phenol, methamphetamines, cocaine, and heroin. In short, lockdowns kill. It's time to start assessing whether a prolonged one presumably with a nationwide mask mandate, is worth a risk to the nation's collective mental health. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, it's one thing to go through military training or other kinds of training where you thrive being alone, and you're required to be alone. Long range scout, Sears training, other things that are oriented towards mission accomplishment. And that makes this sort of thing be kind of water off a duck's back to us, Jim. It doesn't faze us at all to be out of contact and things. But for the average civilian, this must be a earth-shaking, heaven-twisting torment that people really are in shock. They're in the Stockholm syndrome. They have lost their idols, their worship. They've lost their basketball, lost their baseball, lost their football, lost the ability to go out into public and to have musical concerts and all of the things that were the idolatrous styrofoam that built up the American mystique and life and all that jazz. All of that came crumbling down. And I'm always led to believe from a spiritual perspective, this is part of the great trauma, the great shuddering of America to separate people, the sheep and the goats, the patriots and the fools. What David described as this mother with her kids in masks, what a pathetic idiot and a coward and a traitor, because you're selling your birthright for what American heritage is. You're selling your freedom, you're selling your liberty for a little bit of false security that doesn't exist. And the fact that these people can't mentally execute a thought and an analysis of this, the fact that they still are in their stage of the matrix where they're getting all their information and trusting everything that comes out of Anderson Cooper, Don Lemon, NBC, or any of these other high priests of evil. The fact that many of the American people are still listening to that tells me this country and the statistics you're talking about mental health and America being the lowest or the country with the highest mental health problems. Boy, this translates into a nation that is beyond repair. It is beyond repair. There are portions of healthy people. There are geographic regions that will become consolidated. You have safe zones, safe compounds. People are fleeing to. They're fleeing New York. They're fleeing the idiocy and madness of San Francisco, Minnesota, and these other places, Minneapolis. They're leaving in droves for where? For areas where there are guns, where there is open space, where there are people that appreciate guns and are open space people, that they can feel tribally connected to. Tribalism works multidimensional. It's not a black versus everybody. It's black versus whoever doesn't like the thuggery and the violence and isn't going to tolerate it. And it is the white population. It's also the Hindu Sikh population, it's the Vietnamese population, and it's the non-communist Chinese population. Although the Asians are very habitually submissive and quiet and aren't necessarily trained in the militancy that the white Anglo-Saxon Caucasian community is, because we've lived in this for 300 years. These other tribal societies are waking up. These groups are waking up, and they're recognizing that the Democrats once again represent everything that is oppressive, harsh, and enslaving. And this is what is driving people, is this whole phenomenon is causing people to separate, and they're actively talking about civil war, a quiet civil war, not a Ulysses S. Grant, the blues versus the grays, battalions at Gettysburg. No, this is a quiet, behind the trees, without saying a word civil war that will naturally begin to draw lines, and you will have communities of people that will not tolerate Antifa, Black Lives Matter. They won't tolerate one kid coming in with a Molotov cocktail, and you'll have places where these people come in, like the Roach Motel. They'll come in, but they won't go out. They won't walk out. They'll be probably delivered in buckets for fertilizer in the ground, because I think the country is ready. When the police are removed, the country is ready to treat these domestic terrorists in the way that they deserve. Jim?
Scott, I think this woman's behavior is a function of ignorance and stupidity, constant bombardment of propaganda and disinformation. David, your thoughts?
Well, it's very depressing to hear about the suicide rate. It's not surprising. Look, depression is, I mean, I cannot tell you, I have a bunch of wealthy friends. All of their wives are depressed. I have a bunch of impoverished friends. All of their wives are at home and depressed. And I talk to them. My impoverished friends are losing their homes, losing their jobs, facing taxation. My friends that are wealthy are the same thing. Their businesses are at risk. Their homes are at risk. Their families are at risk. This is hitting America on all fronts. It's a uniform external imposition of additional obligations, and it is overwhelming families. It's overwhelming individuals, and this is being done to people by a political agenda. Now, when you get to depression and when you get to suicide, those are absolutely the worst two things that any society could impose on its people. And it's not fair for the government to be doing that to us. And the government, to a certain extent, is becoming our enemy. And we've got to be cognizant of that.
David, I think we'll hold any thoughts you have over. Don, you want to take us out here for our first hour?
Oh boy.
I think you and Scott are exactly on point.
Yeah, I will say that this is one heck of an hour we're having here. And I really thank you so much for watching Truth versus News here and Truth versus Official Facts on Monday, August 17th, the day the Democratic people are going to get together. What a political time, and time to be aware and get your smarts and realize who's on the right side for us and who's has a bigger agenda that seems to be against us. So thanks for watching, folks, and we'll be back for a second scintillating hour. So we'll see you soon.
Oh, my apologies. I was wearing my mask because I just got back from a full day of being a good person. I love my mask because it's a simple yet effective way to display my righteousness. Am I concerned that 2 children in China dropped dead because they were forced to wear masks in gym class? Nope. Am I concerned that we're creating a generation of children who will be socially awkward and conditioned to fear their fellow man? No. Am I concerned that I'm contributing to an impending socialist technocracy that will enslave the global population? Not even a little bit. Am I concerned that my mask is symbolic of my compliance to the social conditioning that will eventually lead to the forced vaccination of every man, woman, and child on planet Earth? Not a chance. And why am I not concerned, you ask? I'm not concerned because I decided a long time ago that shallow, insignificant gestures are a much easier way to showcase my morality than actually being moral. Because in order to be a real good person, I gotta stand up to a real bad person. And I don't like standing up to or for anything. I've decided that it's much easier to trick my own mind into thinking compliance is a virtue instead of what compliance actually is: cowardice. I prefer to float through life completely ignorant to the fact that every socialist takeover has always begun in the exact same way, with government overreach, public shaming, censorship, and a toilet paper shortage. Don't believe me? Google toilet paper shortage in communist Russia. Did you think you were having a unique experience? I prefer to pretend history never repeats itself so that I can stand by and turn a blind eye every time history repeats itself. I prefer to call anyone who speaks up, fights back, or stands their ground a lunatic or a conspiracy theorist so that I don't feel obligated to do my own research. Research takes away from me time. And lastly, I prefer to put on my mask and stand among a sea of masks so that I never have to be seen, be free, or reveal the deep dark shadows that lurk within me.